Welcome to another edition of Math with Mr. Douglas. Yes, today we're looking at solving by multiplication and division. Are you ready for your algebra journey? Here we go. The Incredibles. What a fantastic movie. It still holds up. Leave in the comments. Tell me who your favorite character is. I'm personally a big fan of Dash. I thought he was lots of fun. And speaking of fun, we're looking at solving by multiplying and dividing today. Hopefully you've already checked out my adding and subtracting video. And let's just get right into it. There's going to be some things that you're going to have to remember. So I just want to remember a couple things is how you multiply fractions. This is going to be really important. So remember, when we're multiplying fractions, we're multiplying across the top like this and across the bottom. So if we did that, we would get 2 times 4 and we get 3 times 5. So you'd have 8 times 15. And you'd always go and simplify if you could, obviously. The other thing we have to remember is stuff like this. What does 5x really mean? It really means 5 times some number x. Other ways you could write is 5 times x, something like that. So do remember that there is a hidden multiplying sign there. And of course, there's one last thing we have to remember. We have to remember the golden rule. And basically that golden rule is what you do to one side, you do to the other. So what you do to one side, comma, you always do to the other. And if you're wondering, like, what do you mean by sides? Well, basically, remember, if you had an equation that looked like this, 5x plus 2 equals 10, there are 2 sides to the equation. And you do a squiggly line down the equal sign, and you basically have side A and you have side B. So there's 2 sides there, okay? So there's 2 sides there. If you're like, where did A and B come from? I can see kids thinking that. This is side 1, this is side 2. Okay, so 2 different sides. So just make sure you do that because that keeps everything balanced. And we like things that are balanced. So let's get to it, shall we? Let's take a look at multiplying first, because that's going to be a little bit easier, I think. So I'm going to use some examples, so I think it's going to be the easiest. So 6x equals 18. And this is basically what I want you to be thinking of. So if you're Math Bear, have we seen Math Bear for a while? I don't know if we've seen Math Bear for a while. I always like Math Bear. He's always happy. So we got Math Bear, and you gotta be thinking, this means 6 times x. 6 times some number is 18. Now I know you know the answer is 3. I know that, but I don't care about the answer, I care about the process. And I care that you show your math properly. So there's a couple of things. I want you to think of opposites. So what is the opposite of multiplying by 6? If you think of the opposite of multiplying by 6 is dividing by 6. Okay, so I want to go and I'm going to divide this. Here's my squiggly line. I'm going to divide this by 6. I'm going to divide this side by 6. You have to do it to both sides. I show my work this way with a line, and I work vertically. Those are really important things. What is 6 divided by 6? 6 divided by 6 is just 1. So I'm left with 1x. Well, 18 divided by 6 is just going to be 3. Now, that is 1x, but we should get into the habit of just writing this just as x equals 3. Nice and easy, just like that. Now, you might be wondering, like, why are we all doing this? Remember, the whole thing of algebra is get x by itself. That's the whole idea. So for here, you have to ask yourself, so here's your 2 sides of your equation. How do I make this just say x? What do I need to get rid of? I need to get rid of this negative 4. That would just leave me with x. How do I get rid of a negative 4? Well, I would divide I can do the opposite, by a negative 4. Now, a common kid mistake, a KKM, common kid mistake, would be just to divide by 4. No, children. You have to divide by a negative 4, okay? Because when you do that, what's a negative divided by a negative, everybody? It's a positive. Yes, it's a positive. And over here, of course, we're going to divide this by negative 4 because we want to keep balance in the force. And that would be, the answer would then be negative 5. Okay, so when you're dividing, you have to divide by that negative sign if it is there. That's really, really important. Now, of course, you can have some tricky teachers. You can have some tricky teachers that might have you start to do things like, oh, I don't know. No, I'll do that. Yeah, sure. Negative 7x equals negative 21. So again, what are you going to divide by? You're going to divide by a negative 7, and this side by a negative 7. So don't forget, a negative divided by a negative is going to give you a positive. Okay, so that's solving the first part. But the second part, we're going to look at dividing. And dividing is going to take a little while to explain, so you have to bear with me. So this is by dividing. And I want to show you something. I want to show you some questions. And it's going to look a little bit different. Let's start with 3 quarters. 3 quarters times x is equal to 8. Okay, 3 quarters times x is equal to 8. So this is just multiplying by 3 quarters. Another way that I could have written this is 3x over 4 equals 8. So this is the first part to really, why could I write that 2 different ways? Well, you have to remember 3 quarters times x. It's really x over 1, isn't it? And remember, we recalled how to multiply our fractions. So we multiply like this, right? So if I did that, I would get 3 times x, which is 3x, and 4 times 1, which is 4. So you can write it like this, or I could write it like this. That's really important to keep in mind, especially for the next examples. Let me just go and now show you. So same question. So I'm going to write it this way, though. 3 quarters x equals 8. Now, this is like another question that might say 2x equals 10, right? Which one looks easier? Well, this one does, right? Because it's not a fraction. Don't be scared of fractions. So what would you do for this one? You would just divide by, what would you do? You would divide by 2, right? Divide by 2. Nice and easy. You're like, hey, this algebra thing isn't too bad. So don't be freaked out by fraction. Let's go and do the exact same thing. Let's divide by 3 quarters. It looked kind of weird, doesn't it? For sure. So divide by 3 quarters. So when you divided 2 by 2, remember way over here, remember way back ago, like 30 seconds ago, when you divided 2 by 2, that just eliminated that, leaving you with this x. Well, guess what 3 quarters divided by 3 quarters does? It just eliminates that and it leaves you with x. But this says 8 divided by 3 quarters. 8 divided by 3 quarters. Now, being good math students, you know that this really means 8 times 4 over 3. You actually multiply by the reciprocal. And when you do that, you get 32 over 3. So x is equal to 32 over 3. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Let's take a look at some more, because more examples for these ones are really important. So examples are important, and so here's the next one. Negative 2/3 x equals 18. Okay, so think of the opposite again. Think of the opposite of multiplying by negative 2/3, and the opposite of multiplying by negative 2/3 is going to be dividing by negative 2/3. I must do it to both sides. And when I do that, that'll cancel those out, leaving you with a positive x, because a negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive. And over here, what you end up getting is 18, and I like to write it as 18 over 1, divided by negative 2 over 3. Now, you know when you divide fractions, it's really 18 over 1 times the reciprocal. So it's 3 over negative 2. Remember, reciprocal just means really just kind of flipping things. So I'm going to go and cross reduce first. So I'm going to divide both sides by, or the cross here, by 2. So that'll leave us negative 1, and this will turn into 9. This is 9 times 3, which is going to be 27, and 1 times negative 1. So you get like 27 over negative 1. And in reality, you would probably write x equals just negative 27. Let's take a look at a different way to look at these. So another way to look at them, and maybe you've been taught this, is let's say you had 2/3 x, sure, equals 6. And a way to think about this is, remember all that math you're doing way over in this area right here, right? We had to flip it and then you actually multiply it. Let's just do it right now. So instead of dividing by 2/3 and dividing by 2/3, instead of doing that, let's just go straight to the reciprocal multiplying. So I'm going to multiply this by 3 over 2. And I'm going to multiply this by 3 over 2. I'm going to put this over 1, just to make my life a little bit easier. Now remember, now when I do all this, remember I cross reduce, and it still leaves me with this x. And here I'm going to do my little simplifying first, and it still leaves me with 9. So it just kind of saves you a step. If you multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, really, really important. It's multiplying by the reciprocal. Let's take a look at another one of those ones, because those ones are really great. I like those ones. And let's make it even more confusing. Let's go x over 2 equals 10. Remember, this is also a half x equals 10, just like that. So what is the reciprocal? What's the reciprocal of a half? What's the reciprocal? The reciprocal of a half is going to be 2. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. Do my cross reducing, and the cross reducing just leaves me just with x. So x is equal to do my multiplying here, across and across, and it's going to leave me with 20. One more, because typically these are the ones that cause some issues. So let's do negative. Sure, negative 5/6 x equals 2/5. Sure, why not? Sounds like fun. What's the reciprocal of negative 5/6? The reciprocal is going to be 6 over negative 5. So I'm going to multiply this by 6 over negative 5. So I'm just multiplying this. That, and I'm going to multiply this side by 6 over negative 5. And of course, that would just eliminate all of this stuff, just leaving you with x. And then you're left with this. So x would equal, what's 2 times 6 is 12. And what's 5 times negative 5? It's just negative 25. And there's your answer. Hopefully, this has helped you learn some ways to solve by multiplying and dividing. Good luck. Thanks everybody for tuning in to another edition of Math with the Math Jedi. Hopefully all you Padawan math learners out there know a little bit more about solving by multiplication and division. Combine this with the adding and subtracting, and you are well on your way in your journey for algebra. Until next time, have a great day.